I think footballers often, I mean, they have to be very careful in divorces to make sure they've got a good legal team around them.
I looked at 42% of marriages end in divorce. That's a big number. What I just want to kind of start off, kind of a little bit of background. So obviously you're the CEO right now. Pretty much with obviously Phoenix Sports and Media Group. Just kind of give us a bit of your background.
Well, I studied law at university. I've got a master's in sports law, and then I became a solicitor. I started working in property law initially, and then went into sports law. And at a certain point, I sort of decided that I wanted to get more involved in the practical side of sport. And so I left private practice and went to work for a Formula One team for a short period of time, which was absolutely fantastic, to Renault F1. It was just a short temporary job, but just to cut my teeth on the practical side of sport. And from there, I just knew that was what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting an office at Silverstone Circuit, met some great people, and then somehow ended up in football. It wasn't strategic at all. I thought I'd be in motor racing, but I shared an office with some fantastic guys, a gentleman called Mike Taylor and another called Mike Farnan, and they were both working with Sheffield United. And it was just, I guess, opportunity. We were sat in an office one day together, and they asked if I would help out on a project with Sheffield United. And that was my sort of introduction to football. So there was nothing strategic about it. It was just, one of those sort of lucky introductions that then led to a complete change of path.
So I mean, when you look at like the treatment and where the treatment of players and how players can be treated sometimes, kind of by even at a very, very young age, you know what I mean, in terms of. But I suppose they have to process so many players. So many clubs across Europe have to process so many players. I mean, but do you think that's the big thing? It's you have to have a specific personality to stay in this industry at the highest level.
I think my observation would be, and obviously I'm very privileged to work now at Phoenix. I work with some top level players. We've got Andy Cole, a part of the company, who is one of the all-time greats. What I observe working with the players who've made it to that level is their mental resilience, mental toughness. They've been through some extraordinary experiences. All players have a story, and a lot of the stories involve having to overcome significant obstacles, but it's not always the talent that gets them. Obviously, you've got to be talented, that's a given, but it's I can't overemphasize the mental side of the game, how important it is to have that mental toughness, that resilience, etc. Because that's the trait that I really see amongst the ex-players who've made it, is this ability to triumph over adversity and not give up, just never give up on something that they believe in.
And tell me this. So working with a lot of these guys and kind of the in terms of, obviously, give us the ethos kind of Phoenix. Give us kind of the ethos, kind of what you guys are trying to accomplish, Carly.
Yeah. So Phoenix is a very special company for me because it comes, there's a lot of personal meaning behind it. So it's a group of ex-players, ex-Premier League players who wanted to create the company they wished they'd had looking after them when they were playing. So we don't do sports management or agency work at all. It's all about the things outside of football, whether it's wealth management, preparing for second career, staying safe, security and investigations. So it's everything off pitch. But they felt there was a huge gap there, and that there was a lot of nefarious individuals in the industry who were taking advantage of players, exploiting players. They wanted to create a company that could be trusted, that had top experts involved, that were, good human beings as well as very good at what they do. So they've designed the company. Basically, they've shaped the company into what they felt was missing in the industry.
When do you think it really begins where they're being exploited, and how are they being exploited, Carly? Just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
If in terms of financial exploitation, if you're talking about financial advice, then it really, I I think that starts the moment, you know, if a bad or wrong advisor is chosen. So I think it's really, really important that players choose very carefully the people around them, and also have better education around what to look out for, and financial literacy. We're very passionate about that, because I think that the challenge is that for players, in that when you're trying to make it, all your focus and concentration has to be on playing football. It's such a, you know, it's one of the most competitive industries in the world. So naturally, a player's focus is on that. It's on performance, and quite rightly so. But then if you trust people around you to take care of the other aspects of your life, and you don't have an understanding of what's going on, it's very, very easy to get exploited. And I think that is what happens far too frequently, and particularly because there's so much money in professional sport, it attracts people who basically are trying to take that money away from the players. So it's a big issue. And I think that kind of combination of a lack of financial awareness and lack of financial education, and a sudden overnight success and sudden massive sums of money, is a bit of a recipe for disaster. People tend to have success and money more gradually, and as a result of business acumen. So, you know, there's a natural financial understanding and awareness. Whereas I think with sport, there's that complete, you're focused on sport, and the other side of things is dealt with by other people who you trust to look after your affairs, your business affairs, your money. And that's all well and good if you've got good people there that do what they say they're going to do. But I think players have to be aware of the fact that if they do that, they're very vulnerable to exploitation. And so what we're trying to do is to help create awareness, help create a basic level of understanding, and give the control back to the player.
So, so if you're kind of looking at kind of the, for example, they're being exploited, but if you're looking at like the path to poverty, and I suppose way before you come to bankruptcy, if you're from a poor area, Carly, and that's where most footballers are going to come from, if we're perfectly honest. But where is the hope? Because the state doesn't have the money to educate them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think financial education is a big topic in you know, throughout the globe, but I know that, you know, it's a problem amongst society generally, and that, you know, I've seen Martin Lewis has been doing some absolutely fantastic work trying to get financial education GCSE on the curriculum and things like that, which is, you know, I think generally there's sort of an issue here. But within football, I think there's a very specific set of factors. You know, you've got dressing room pressure, you've got things that perhaps are unique to footballers. So what we're doing is we're about to run some roadshows in football clubs throughout the country with ex-players. So Paul Williams, ex-manager, ex-football player, is going to be one of the people presenting this, and Mark McGee, former manager. And I think it's really important for me personally, for them to be actually doing the educating is fantastic, because they're able to give real world advice, to say, I understand what it's like to be in your shoes, to be in the dressing room. I understand the pressure you're under, and this is how you can deal with it. Because actually, you know, financial education that applies to maybe somebody who's outside football is entirely different to the financial lessons, the financial wisdom that footballers need, because they have quite unique circumstances. I think it's just really important to, you know, offer different products, accept where players are, but then try and work with that to make them more aware, and make sure they know all the range of options of what's available to them, so they can make sensible choices. I think it's all about making the right choices.
Right. Just out of curiosity, just so obviously, as we kind of look at when obviously players are kind of going bankrupt. Take us through a number of things, and then we'll kind of talk about some solutions, so for the audience that are watching, that they can actually see how players need, and how you, if you're a young player starting out, you're going in that you're kind of, you know, what you need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, looking at what's happened with my husband's generation of players, and looking at the sort of the high numbers of very successful Premier League players who were part of the generation that earned the significant sums of money, they're the sort of the pioneers of the Premier League, if you like.
Right.
I would say personally, and you know, it's just my personal experience, that the biggest issue has been financial advisors and film schemes tax avoidance schemes, which were
Right.
very much the scheme of the day, in that you probably, if you were to go back and do a survey and work out how many players in each dressing room in the Premier League invested in film schemes, there'd be very high proportions, because they were being targeted by financial advisors to invest in film schemes. So they just spread around dressing rooms like wildfire. And that seems to have caused an inordinate amount of pain. I see many situations where players were advised that they were something that they're not, and are not able to deal with the consequences. And so there's a extremely high rate of numbers who've paid a very heavy price for that. Affinity fraud is a concept that's not so well known in the UK, but it's very big in the States, and it's where a fraudster can penetrate a close-knit group of people, and who have inherent trust amongst them. So sport is rife with these kind of issues, where players will perhaps invest in something because somebody they trust within the dressing room is investing in it. So a senior pro might be saying, look, you ought to go in this, or a manager, it could be anybody, or just somebody says, oh, this is fantastic, you should have a look at it. And that means it's sort of a hotbed of potential issues, where if that person who's brought in the investment happens to be a fraudster, then there's a massive issue, because it will just spread. So I think there are, it's that educating players that they should always get second opinions, and independent second opinions, to say there's nothing wrong with investing in something recommended by a friend, as long as you get it independently checked out, so that you know what it is that you're investing in.
Right. And I mean, see, when you're talking a lot about these schemes and all of these things, and just the fact that there's a lack of awareness from the players, what would you say, Carly, kind of is going to need to, in terms of, so if I'm looking at it and I look at specific financial education, but what, in terms of what are the clubs doing in between that? Do you think they have a responsibility? You think, no, they're a separate entity, they have to look after their own business? So I like to see both sides of the coin,
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I see it one way, because I work with the players, and we have an investor rescue service at Phoenix, which has been set up to help ex-players who get themselves into financial difficulties and financial distress through mis-selling or fraud. So I obviously have a natural tendency to see it from that perspective, but I genuinely believe clubs need to do more. The governing bodies of sport need to do more, because that's the only way we're going to deal with this issue. And it is such a big issue. It's a silent epidemic in football, without question. And you've got virtually an entire generation of ex-pros having significant issues because of this. And there's, if I look at my own personal experience with some of Craig's teammates, I mean, we know an awful lot of people, far too many people, struggling with this issue. There's been suicide attempts, marriage breakdowns. There's there's a big ripple effect from this. It's not just about losing money, it's about the consequences it causes. It's irreversible, life-changing issues. So if you to say to me clubs don't have a responsibility, I feel they do, because if these people are allowed into club premises, then these players are being exposed to it because they're footballers, because they're in that place at that time. So I think clubs do have a responsibility to make sure people aren't getting into their premises and pitching to players when they've not been checked, there's not been due diligence carried out.
I mean, one of the big advantages that I do love about continental Europe, which is why we kind of started the brand Continental Aspire Soccer, is most of the players over there in Bundesliga and Eredivisie, most of their money goes into like employee trust funds and stuff for them. So half of their salary is in that, they can't touch it, basically. So but the reason why that is, and this one is I explained to people, because this is why you need to understand the politics of it. Holland and Germany, they're socialist. It's a socialist system, and socialist system is about protecting people. Versus in the UK, we're a capitalist society. We just are, and capitalism is trying to. Now, I think the Germans underneath Merkel, I think they're going to rise up, and I think Germany will change. Because obviously that's why you can only own a club In Germany, 49%. So they stop. So you know what I mean. A lot of the players don't get robbed as much. You don't see it. When I speak to agents over there, that just doesn't happen. To be quite honest, it seems to be a problem here, though.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hoping will happen is that there's going to be a societal shift because of coronavirus, and that there's going to be more of an emphasis on people and well-being. And I think it's tragic what's happened in football. I really do. It's a fantastic, beautiful game, and I love it. And I'm passionate about football and the sports industry in this country. But I think, unfortunately, it is being overshadowed by some of these really serious issues. Sex abuse is rife. Financial abuse is rife, and we know many players who have been sexually abused, financially abused, or both. And where's the safeguarding? It's and it's human beings at the end of the day. I don't it's a side that people don't see of the football industry, but it's only going to get better. It's only the next generation are only going to be protected if it's taken seriously and it's looked at and addressed. And it just seems to me that there's sort of a burying heads under the sand, sort of thinking nobody's taking responsibility for it, and that's a great shame because lives are being destroyed as a result. Now,
what about for example a partner? like you see a lot of women that come in, and I'm not going to defend men here, but I'm going to say what I see. I believe that women are defended in terms of where they get preference. I think that's very unfair. If I'm honest, you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, I do feel that men often get a raw deal in divorce law in this country. I had the experience of the Canadian system, and I found that more balanced. I mean, obviously there's I shouldn't really make generalizations like that. There's other cases where it's different, but I think footballers often, they have to be very careful in divorces to make sure they've got a good legal team around them, because judges without education can see the pay that they're on at that time and not really understand the trajectory, and that pay isn't going to continue for the rest of their career. So you need a really good lawyer to point that out, who understands the mechanics of football and things, because it might sound self-evident to us because we're in the football industry, but for a judge who knows nothing about football and footballers, it's really got to be pointed out, the fact that, because otherwise judges can make awards based on what they see at the time, and we know that fortunes can change dramatically overnight. So that's something we end up acting as a bridge. Actually, we dealt with a very high profile divorce during lockdown, which is quite bizarre because it was all virtual courts and things. A very strange experience.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, but we offer that service where we are like a bridge between the lawyer and the player, where we understand the player's circumstances, but we can also keep a check on the lawyer to make sure, as you say, that they're not going off in the wrong direction for something and charging too much money for that we can,
because they're very transactional lawyers. Obviously you obviously know this. This was always my understanding, because my family, I've got solicitors in my family, and that's kind of the way they think, and I mean, do you think lawyers, when they see footballers coming, do you think they think
some can,
I don't mean they're all like that, you know what I mean?
No.
That would be harsh, but
I think some can. I think, again, it's about having your eyes open, being aware of the risks. In the law, like every profession, there are fantastic lawyers. We work with a QC called Simon Myerson QC, and I could not speak more highly about him, because he's got a heart of gold as well as being an absolutely brilliant advocate. So you've got people like him in the industry who are absolutely amazing. But on the flip side, like life, you've got bad people, bad lawyers as well, who aren't always doing the right thing by their clients and maybe are putting their own interests first. So, players have to be aware that there's good, it's like dentists, you're going to have fantastic dentists who are really good at their job, and there's other dentists who might not be, and, might be in it for the wrong reasons. So you can't just sort of say everyone in law is great or everyone's bad. There's good and bad. But it is somewhere where, again, it pays to have that education, that little bit of knowledge, so that when you're being ripped off, when you're not, what questions should you be asking? What does the initial contract mean? What are you signing up to? So that's one of the things our owners, our ex-players specifically wanted in our company, because they, you know, that's something that happened to them.
And so whenever you're looking at so in terms of a lawyer, so you guys would have a select group of lawyers that you just stick to, and they look after any players you have. So do you guys just like so Carly, would you guys get contacted by professional players pretty much but they already have like an agent, but you guys aren't an agent, so would they contact you, or would they be recommended? And the ambassadors, what's their role, and how to draw up that connection? Absolutely. And how that all works?
I mean, it can work either way. I mean, we work with agents, again, good and bad agents, you know, and you know, we offer services that agents don't. So we're a company there to help the agents protect the player and work with the player, as well as we get direct contact from players saying, can you help me with this? The ambassador's role, our co-founders, it's they designed the service, so they really rolled up their sleeves and said, this is what we feel players need. So they were able to give that first-hand insight of having stood in those same shoes. So they designed the service so that it's exactly what a player needs.
Right.
But then we have a team of experts that are carefully vetted, like, for example, a chosen lawyer who's a divorce specialist, where, as I'm a lawyer myself, I can say, well, that person is really, really good and is the right person for the divorce, or this person is right for insolvency and bankruptcy. So we're able to sort of vet people. If we don't have people in-house, we can help recommend people, very, very good experts to help players, and we can be that bridge in the middle as well. But the players play our co-founders play a very, you know, a daily role in the business. Whilst they're not advising anyone themselves, but what they're doing is they're creating the service, and that's invaluable, because, you know, only really players know what players want. I could say, well, I think I would need this, but having not felt the fear in the tunnel and having not stood in those exact same shoes, I wouldn't have the same knowledge as our co-founders have. So they've come up with some that are absolutely amazing.
And you know, Carly, you know, when obviously Marion Craig, you know what I mean? Obviously been a player, you know, had a very good career, but whenever he in terms of any stuff that he's doing, so you would oversee any of his contracts and stuff, because you're a lawyer, so you would know that, or how? Obviously that must be helpful for him, you know, as having a legal mind there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't officially, I'm not an agent or anything for any of our clients, including my husband, but I will oversee things. I will look at things for Craig. You know, absolutely. It's
would he always ask you like questions? Would he ask you questions like legal questions and stuff like that? Carly, so see, in terms of expensive partners, so if we look at that from the men's side, what is your, obviously, you know what I mean, you obviously you married a footballer, but not everybody is going to be like you. They, you know what I mean, they will come in with different motivations.
Yeah, there's a lot of predatory women out there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Players and their family have to be very aware of that, because it can be very costly and it can be heartbreaking. And obviously, you know, not every woman, again, same thing. It's that, you know, it's not everybody, but that I've seen it firsthand. I've been been with, you know, socialized with a lot of players. I've represented a lot of players, and I've been out in a social setting with players where women have even approached me and said, are you with that player? And then when I say, no, I'm working with the player, then it's, well, can you give my number? And, you know, and there's clear motives. You know, you even get asked questions like, how much is he earning and things. You think, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But I think my sort of advice would be, it's again about awareness. It's about making sure you've got the right protections in place. So cohabitation agreements if you're going to move in with somebody, prenups if you're going to get married, think about it. You know,
they work though, Carly. The prenups work, and explain those. Just kind of just a very on a fundamental level. Just to kind of to go through those.
Yeah, I mean, what it is, I always look at contracts slightly differently in the sense of any kind, that what you're hoping is never to be in a situation where you've got to use it, but what it does in advance is perhaps set out the various things that if things do go wrong, this is how it would work. So a prenup is basically an agreement before you get married to say, if things go wrong, this is how the assets would be divided. So there's a negotiation in advance. Cohabitation agreements in comparison are for when people are moving in together but are not married. So again, a similar sort of situation where it just outlines well, if we were to split up, what happens to that house and the belongings within the house? Because otherwise there is a real risk of spending a fortune on lawyers' fees and legal fees. So it's not my area of law. I'd always defer to a family lawyer.
Specialist, yeah.
But as a general concept, I think it's important, because of the amount of money involved and the nature of some of the women in attracted to sport, to try and, if you can, it's a good idea to consider these things at an early age and an early stage, because it can save an awful lot of expense if things do go wrong, because lawyers' fees can be astronomical, absolutely astronomical.
Well, they have to be paid. I think people have to realize that they're not, they have families also, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there can't be preference, What are you guys doing at Phoenix? What sort of things are you seeing? Are you trying to stop things before they develop? When you're looking at a situation, you say, okay, that person's not in a good place.
Absolutely. We're approaching it on two levels. There's the activities we're taking for current players and young players, which is about providing an extra layer of support if they need it. So Paul Williams is heading this side of the activities in our business. He's obviously worked in football management and coaching. He's a big, strong, tough centre half, but very conscious of the importance of mental health and ensuring that no matter what, how people perceive you, even if they perceive you as a big, strong, tough centre half, that you might need extra supports, and that you've got to focus on your mental well-being. So he's actually done a counsellor's course and mental first aid course. I think he's on at the moment because he's very passionate about it. So we've set up a team of experts in the field who are there to give that extra support to players if and when they need it, and according to what their needs are. So they've all been carefully vetted again to make sure that we've just got that additional support if it's needed. So that's about trying to, at an early stage, set up an infrastructure for players so that everybody's got different needs, everyone's got different mental health needs. So it's about ensuring that they can be addressed, because if clubs are not meeting those needs, and some clubs are very good and players are very happy, which is fantastic, but there's others who either feel they need extra or they feel they're not getting the support they should be. And so that's where we're providing that service. For ex-players, it's more, there's some horrible things going on amongst our ex-players. I've taken, and it's no exaggeration, I've taken many, 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 many calls from ex-players on the brink of suicide, who needed solutions. Somebody to talk to, but more than anything else, solutions, because they found themselves in difficulties.
Right.
And didn't know where to go with it, didn't know where to turn, particularly financial issues through poor advice. So it was very much about what we're doing there is a combination of welfare support if and when needed, but combined with practical solutions, because counselling alone is not the answer for many of our clients or many of the experts out there, because if you're not able to give the solution at the same time, then just talking about it isn't enough. But I think it's getting the combination right, where if people are we've seen a lot of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, amongst players who've basically been financially abused. Is perhaps an unpalatable word, but accurately describes what we've been seeing. We've got a team of detectives. We've got some fantastic guys, Craig Morris and Dave Matthews, superb individuals who are former detectives who've been working with ex-players to try and unravel some of the things that have happened to them.
Right.
And Craig is ex-military. He's very familiar with PTSD and was the first to say to me, I think PTSD is a big issue amongst ex-football players. And I was like, really? What do you mean? I was associating PTSD with going to war and having a sort of a very traumatic sort of obvious incident. And he was sort of the first one to say, no, I think this is PTSD. Then we spoke to various experts in the field who absolutely agreed and said, look, it's a trauma. When people suddenly find out that their trust has been abused and they find themselves in significant financial distress virtually overnight, it is a trauma, and it needs specialist help to rebuild their lives and to rebuild their sort of shattered mental health. And particularly if people have been at the brink of committing suicide, then they need some specialist welfare support to get well again. So that's really what we've been doing with the ex-players, is trying to combine proper specialist expert welfare support, but in conjunction with solutions, so that we can show a pathway, we can show some light to say, you may be in that situation right now, but this is the light to where you can be. You're not in a black hole. There's a way out of this. And I think that's where the suicide attempts come, when people just feel that they've got themselves in such a mess and there's no way out of it, and they just don't know who to trust. Their trust has been so badly abused that they just feel whoever they speak to is going to rip them off again. Including lawyers or accountants. I think they're just so burnt that they don't know where to go. And that's what we're really trying to do to help make a difference, is to say, well, there is a way out of any situation, and to try and help provide that roadmap. Because if you've got a roadmap and a plan, then you can see progress. So it might not be, well, we can get you out of this immediately. We can't give you a magic wand, but we can put a plan in place to try.
It's really good to hear that you guys have got a military person on there, because I think that sometimes society paints a picture of footballers to say, oh, footballers, oh, they've got all this money, why are they frigging complaining? And I'm thinking, come on, you know what I mean?
We hear it so often. There was my husband did an article in The Independent many years ago talking about some of the financial losses he'd experienced through poor advice, and it was a big deal, you know, putting your head above the parapet. As I say, you know, I really admired doing that, and then one journalist put a headline, "Pity the poor footballers, I don't think so," and I was enraged, because there was a very serious issue being spoken about. In fact, I wrote a letter in to say I find this a disgusting attitude, because it's you know, a complete misunderstanding of the devastation that's been caused, and the damage that some of this financial abuse can cause to people as individuals, the PTSD, etc. But it was almost as if, well, you're footballers, it doesn't count. It's like saying that they're not human beings anymore, which, you know, ultimately strip away the profession. We're all human beings, and that we all deserve to be 100%. Treated as human beings. And I think sometimes the whole money involved in football and the sort of stereotypes just get in the way of people actually viewing everyone as a human being. We were very we've been working with a gentleman called Michael Coates, who's in the military field. He's ex-forces, and he does a fantastic podcast called Declassified, which is sharing stories of military veterans, and he's been given lots of advice, and he put me in contact with a gentleman called Dr. Walter Buzzatiel, who's a Maltese clinician who is probably one of the leading experts in PTSD, because I wanted to get some advice as to how do we deal with the issues we're seeing, because they're very, very serious, and, you know, we want to make sure that our clients are getting the right advice with the best in the business that we possibly can. And he was brilliant. His story is that he actually was the first person sent in to help Terry Waite went into Beirut after his captivity. So he's an absolute trauma specialist, and it was all about, the conversation we had was all about finding purpose and meaning, and finding, you know, it's very important to actually have a purpose and have something to do. So that's where we started our training business, to try and help players who are coming out of sport to have purpose and meaning in their life after sport, because it's not just about earning money. It's really important to be able to get up in the morning and really want to get up and do things, and to have a sense of identity again, etc. And I found that one conversation I had with Dr. Buzzatiel very, very enlightening in terms of, you know, how you recover from PTSD, and also how important it is for players to, in their new journey, in their new pathway, to have, you know, purpose and meaning.
And then, I mean, obviously 2004, Ray Parlour had to pay his ex $440,000 every year, and more than a third of his 1.2 million, and also coaches, various ex-players in the game. Do you know what I mean? So when you look at that, those are frightening numbers, Carly. That's
absolutely.
That's not a small number, you know. No. So I mean, what are your thoughts, Carly, on employee benefit trust and in terms of for players financially, so that it doesn't lead them to mental health, which won't lead to suicide, and men obviously being more likely than women, which I think is a good thing in women's football, because that's not likely. I mean, I know in Northern Ireland this year, I mean, I think there was probably about 5, or I think there was like six Irish league players took their own lives this year. Just, you know what I mean? That's a very alarmingly large number. And I know that's part to do with the Troubles, but at the same time, you know what I mean? If you look at and obviously you're getting calls, so what really needs to happen, do you think?
Absolutely. I think it's a combination, because you've got to look at the fact this is happening in other globally successful sports as well, like the NFL. But, you know, I compare the NFL at the moment to football, and I just think there's so many more initiatives taking place. There's financial boot camps, the authorities over there take it very seriously. There's all sorts going on, and their statistics seem to be even worse than ours. I think it's a combination of factors, really. We definitely need more awareness of what is happening to ex-players at the moment, that what's going on at ground level. I think it's very, very important that that's recognised, that because, as you say, the statistics are horrific, really horrific. It should not be happening, and it's preventable. This is the thing that's really sad about it all, is that it doesn't need to be this way. But I think it's a combination of, for ex-players who are in difficulties, there needs to be more support. You know, that absolutely, I can say firsthand, there needs to be more support. I should not be getting all these calls. I mean, I'm glad I'm getting the calls, because it means I'm able to help, but there should be something there. You know, there should be something there. Absolutely. Education as well.
In terms of, so if you look at like some success stories, so I look at like Robbie Fowler and Gary Neville. I heard Gary Neville talk on a business show and stuff that he's spoken about. Do you think they would be great advocates? Do you think Phoenix would ever maybe get advice from people like them, because they have a track record?
We do, absolutely. So we've got all sorts of initiatives coming where we can show success. I think it's really, really important to actually balance out the horror stories with the success stories, to show, you know, that for me, I'm a huge believer in the skill sets of professional football players. To make it to the top of football, you've got to have some extraordinary qualities, and it's just finding the mechanism to transfer those qualities into success in anything else. And I think that it's really important that success stories are highlighted, to be able to show you've had success in your first career. There's nothing stopping you having success or more success in something else you do in life, because you've got these fantastic skill sets of resilience, of you're dedicated, you learn punctuality in football, and there's some great stories out there. You know, Reece Wabaru, young players at Man City. We were just having some discussions with his father recently about, he's gone on to create a brand, Manoir Devoir, that's been tremendously successful, which is a great inspirational story for players. There was, I think it's Flamini, is it, who's gone on into biotech.
That's right. Yeah. Doing very well.
Yeah, I read somewhere that, you know, he might be a billionaire from all that he's done there. And look at stories like George Clooney and how he's gone into an alcohol production and made fortunes. So it's really, really important we get those stories out there to show it can happen. But I think there's got to be a pathway. So what we've been trying to do is we're creating some practical business skills programs, mini MBAs, and things like that, so that we can, there's an additional transitional pathway, so that you don't just go from one thing into something else without having a grounding of skills and basic knowledge. And that's something our founders were really passionate about, saying we want to help footballers have tremendous talent. Let's help them have huge success in their next stage of life, as opposed to just saying avoid these traps. How do you actually turn that from avoid these traps and also transfer those wonderful skills you've got into tremendous success in life beyond sport?
What about as well, when you're looking at the finances, right? If you're looking at like the finances, Carly, right? If you look at the money in football, it's obviously quite frightening for a young player, right? But if you think about it from this person, do you not think, even though they've got to concentrate in their performance, do you not think the player has to also, do you not think they also have to know, the state of their own finances? I mean, do you not think there has to be some ownership there?
100%. That's what we've got to teach players, is how to take control and not to take their eye off it. So despite the demands of the sport, that it's absolutely vital you know what everybody in your team is doing and you've got oversight, because if you don't, then, you know, all sorts of things could be going on. So I think that's really, really important. And it, you know, every stage in life, really, in the same sense that, you know, as a lawyer, I would be looking at what any lawyer is doing. If I have to engage a lawyer, I'm going to be looking at it closely to make sure they're doing the job that I've instructed them to do. I think what we've got to get away is this blind trust in professionals. and other people to say,
absolutely,
I employ somebody to do this, therefore I assume they're going to do it. Actually, you've got to still, you're the manager of your own affairs. So you're the manager of your own business interests. You just got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and I think that's because as I'm looking at divorce, right, and I look at that as a financial burden on a player, right. I look at 42% of marriages end in divorce. That's a big number. Then obviously you look at people divorced in Wales, but then you look at 45 to 49 is the most common age bracket for divorce. So that's post football age. Because if you think a player retires at 49, that's not very long. That could be maybe 5 to 9 years maximum. And then then 60%. And then of course you look at what the tax bill is at the end of in terms of legal aid, Lost Stars work, it's 51 billion pounds. I mean, that's not. So you look at the legal costs, the legal fees, the financial child maintenance, and you factor in all of those, and then that then leads on to the mental health, which is 40% of people in debt will also incur mental health problems. So it means they're going to probably need a lawyer that is obviously a mental health advocate. They could end up going to a mental health lockup ward, depending on if they suffer from schizophrenia or some other undiagnosed. Then of course the money and the survey report of 5,500 people found that people with mental health problem found that while unwell, 93 spent more than usual. 92% far harder to make financial decisions. 74% put off paying bills. 71% avoided dealing with creditors, and 56 took a loan out that they'd never be able to pay back, basically.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things I would definitely say is in terms of obviously, like I say, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and obviously Carly, where can the players, where can they find out about you guys in terms of social media?
Absolutely. We've got a website first and foremost, which gives lots of details of who's in the team, what we do. It's psm-group.co.uk. And we're also on social media. We've got an Instagram page. And something I'd really say for players, if they can follow our Instagram, for the next year, we're going to be releasing short video clips from ex-players with very small tips each week, where they're talking from their personal experience, whether it's money, whether it's performance, but we're trying to, in a very fun, sort of engaging way, give players information and education, and it's going to come from ex-players who've stood in those same shoes. So Instagram would be, the best starting point, I think, or just reach out to us if there's anything they feel they need, give us a call or email us, and we are more than happy to help. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we've got a website.
Okay, so like I say, guys, any questions that you may have for Carly, like I say, don't forget to subscribe to the notification squad, and like I say, any comments you have, we can then forward them on to Carly. And like I say, it's been great. It's been a great episode this morning, and Carly, like I say, thank you so much for your time, and have a good one.